Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Kind of more of the same tomorrow. The weather patterns are slowly starting to shift, but again, grey and dry for most tomorrow. But there'll be, again, some sunshine in northern Scotland. High pressure is still sitting to the east, keeping the weather fronts at bay for now. A bit of drizzle here and there today, particularly across southwest England, staying a bit damp and drizzly and dank across the south coast of England tonight, and turning that way too across parts of the east, northeast England into eastern Scotland, seeing some drizzle. Northwest Scotland keeping the clear skies, could see some fog here, and certainly temperatures in sheltered glens likely to get down close to freezing. For most though, we'll start the weekend at 6 or 7, 9 or 10 in the west. On to Saturday. And it is kind of dry and cloudy, but there will be a bit more in the way of drizzle, perhaps along the south coast of England. Again, mostly over the hills, so the moors in the southwest, seeing a bit of drizzle, but also northeastern parts of England, a bit dank and drizzly here, and some of that working into eastern Scotland. Cloudy for Northern Ireland, but western Scotland doing okay for sunshine. There will be some fog around first thing, and actually that fog could be quite stubborn. It could persist for much of the day, but generally it's the far northwest which will see the bluest of the skies. Elsewhere, again, a pretty grey day. Some drizzle at times on eastern coasts and across the south, but many areas just dry and dull, and a little colder than it has been for much of this week. Temperatures struggling, particularly across central and eastern England, only 8-9 degrees, and with that drizzle feeling even cooler. Further west, we should climb into the teens. Now, on Sunday, we will start to see more of a change, a bit more in the way of wet weather coming into the west. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle, nothing too heavy, but behind this band of rain, western Scotland and Northern Ireland should get brighter for the afternoon. Most of England and Wales staying pretty grey, but some brightness likely in the east on Sunday. So a brighter day here, and also for most of us, a little warmer on Sunday too.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays in Greater Manchester on the M61. 2 lanes remain closed southbound from junction 6 to 5 between Horwich and West Horton at the scene of an accident. In Cheshire on the M6 northbound, the inside lane shut from junction 18 at the A54 Middlewich exit up to 19 at Knutsford following a collision. And the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25 is blocked anti-clockwise just after junction 19, the Watford turn-off. They're recovering a car that broke down. Long queues back to the M1. And on the Kent stretch, the motorway partly blocked clockwise at junction 1B at Dartford following an accident, and in Cornwall northeast of Helston the A394 closed following an accident near to the Wendron turn-off. On to public transport. And on London Underground, there are severe delays on the Jubilee line following a faulty train at Green Park, and Holloway Road station remains closed. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could win Christmas on us this year. There's cash, £20,025 in tax-free cash to make your new year go with a bang. There's also £5,000 to spend on all the gifts. We've also got Christmas lunch for you, with £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a festive GB News goodie bag. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive
Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World. Tonight on the show, I've got political consultant Suzanne Evans. She'll be joined by Bill Rummel. He's a former Labour MP and Minister. We've also got Laurie Laird. She's a US political commentator, and knife crime campaigner Ken Hines. But first, let's go to the news.
A very good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill with your latest headlines in the GB newsroom. Our top story this evening, the United States has charged an Iranian man in connection with an alleged plot to assassinate President-elect Donald Trump before the election. In a statement, the department said that Shakari had informed law enforcement that he was tasked on October 7th, 2024, with providing a plan to kill Trump. The department described Shakari as an Iranian asset residing in Tehran and that he immigrated to the US as a child before being deported in 2008 following a robbery conviction. Now, President Biden has said that the anti-Semitic attacks on Israeli football fans in Amsterdam are despicable and echo dark moments in history. This follows an independent investigation launched by the Dutch authorities into an incident where Israeli football fans were attacked when leaving their Europa match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. The public prosecutor says 62 arrests have been made, and the Dutch Prime Minister has condemned the anti-Semitic attacks. Before the match, there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, with Maccabi supporters reportedly attacking a taxi and setting a Palestinian flag on fire.
They came really late. They came too late. They came when a lot of people were already hurt, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 show information.
Now, sticking with football, Tottenham Hotspur have been charged with misconduct by the Football Association in relation to homophobic chants by their supporters in a match against Manchester United earlier this season. The chants were understood to be aimed at Arsenal's head coach, Mikel Arteta, and United's midfielder, Mason Mount. The club now face sanctions from the national governing body over the matter and have been given until November 13th to respond to the charge. Sir Keir Starmer has pledged £3.5 million in support for veterans facing homelessness. The funding will go to the Reducing Veteran Homelessness programme, which provides wraparound specialist support for employment and independent living for veterans experienced or at risk of it. Announcing the funding boost, Sir Keir said veterans represent the very best of our country and we must honour their sacrifices. Now, Nigel Farage has said he's not convinced by the argument in favour of the assisted dying bill. Reform UK leader told GB News that he'd need a lot of convincing to support the bill that's due in Parliament at the end of the month. He said the way assisted dying takes place in Canada gives him the shivers.
There are people that die in the most appalling circumstances. As an MEP, I was lobbied on that issue more than any other during my 20 years there. So I completely understand why people want this to be law, but I need a lot of convincing that it won't be abused.
And it's been announced that the Princess of Wales is to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said Kate would attend both the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace says the Queen's attendance at Remembrance will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and has been forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. I'll be back in an hour, but now it's back to Lee.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World. I'm Lee Anderson, the Reform UK Member of Parliament for Ashfield. And joining me today, we've got senior political consultant Suzanne Evans and our left in the corner, he's back, former Labour MP, Bill Rummel. Thanks for coming, Bill. Look, there's only one thing we can talk about this week, and that's the US election. Trump is back. Will he make America great again, Suzanne, and will he be a force for good across the globe?
Well, I think he's definitely going to be a force for good when you compare him to what the alternative could have been. It's quite interesting, isn't it? You've got 50% of people in this country are really excited about the fact Trump is back. The other 50%, it's a bit like post-Brexit referendum in 2016. They're crying over their cornflakes, spilling their coffee, absolutely horrified at what's going on. Interesting, just looking at my own personal Facebook page, it's like it's mixed. You know, you've got half people showing this picture of the Statue of Liberty crying her eyes out, and the other half like posting American flags, and they're really, really happy. For me, he was the best of two not terribly exciting or exciting characters, but not terribly, I think, the best characters that America could have had. For me, the world feels a safer place. For me, it's about geopolitics at the moment, which is so much on a knife edge. You've got Putin's Russia, you've got China, you've got North Korea. I wasn't convinced that with Kamala Harris in the White House, those kind of dictators wouldn't have seized their opportunity to meddle even more in world affairs.
Bill, when you heard the results of the US election, were you crying in your cornflakes?
I was gutted. I think the man's a monster. I think he's a danger to America and a danger to the free world. But look, we've got skin in the game here. You know, I think he's going to betray Ukraine. This is going to be Munich 1938 all over again, where, you know, an imperial power can just burst into a country and dictate the terms of surrender. He's a threat to NATO, which has kept our security for over 50 years. And he's an isolationist. You know, talk of 20% tariffs against British exports. If I've learned anything in economics, politics and life, is that free trade is a good and it actually drives economic growth. Trump's against all of that.
Well, I don't agree with that, Bill. I mean, you know, we were working very well towards getting a trade deal with the US when Trump failed to be elected and Joe Biden got in, and then the whole UK-US trade deal was pushed into the grass.
It wasn't. I mean, to be honest, Susan, Joe Biden, he wasn't very pro-British, was he?
He was very anti-British. You know, the amount of times he kind of bigged up Ireland, but was very anti-British as a consequence of that too. So Britain didn't advance at all with the US in terms of Joe Biden. He was a positive liability for our country, I think. Trump, I think, is going to be very different. We do have that special relationship. And of course, he has a special relationship with Nigel Farage, who is now your colleague in the Houses of Parliament. And obviously, Nigel is calling for the red carpet to be rolled out for Trump to come on a state visit here. And I think that would be a very good thing.
The reality is that we have a strong mutually dependent relationship with the United States, and that will be pursued under this government.
But I mean, you look at the cabinet, the current cabinet, the Labour front bench. I think half of those, Bill, have actually openly said that they want nothing to do with Trump in the past. That's not a good start, is it?
Yeah, and there's a host of Conservative politicians who've said very disrespectful, damaging things about Donald Trump. I mean, look, he is unlike any major leader I have known. He lies consistently. You know, he tried to overthrow a legitimate democratic election result 4 years ago, inciting violence and death in Washington. I think he's a real concern, but we will work with him. But I tell you, you know, some of his policy prospectuses, and I come back to tariffs on British exports, are going to be really damaging for us. And, you know, already some of the banks have downgraded their growth forecasts for this country because Trump has been elected.
Sounds like Bill's making an excuse for this pathetic Labour government.
I think it is. I mean, the fact is, the day after the election, the stock market in London, which has been in the dumps for weeks now, actually rallied quite significantly, particularly the FTSE 250, which is a domestically focused index. So that wasn't, clearly investors weren't terribly worried about tariffs at that point, certainly. Yes, the pound fell against the dollar. But again, you know, the Dow went up, I think, something like nearly 2%. So the markets, the economy, actually back Trump, which I think puts a lie to what Bill is saying.
But no, you talk about skin in the game. We've got skin in the game, but Trump's got skin in the game in this country as well. I think his mother's Scottish. He obviously loves his country. He's got a golf course up in Scotland. He's got friends like Suzanne says. Nigel Farage is a good friend, so he wants to do business with us, surely.
Yeah, and we want to do business with him. I mean, you know, this government, like any previous UK government, will do business with whoever is the President of the United States, and you'll see that moving forward. But, you know, what I think the interesting thing, if we get out of the adversarial debate between us, the really interesting thing is, why did he win, and why did he win so big? Because I always thought it was possible that he would win, but he won emphatically. The single biggest driver, I think, was the cost of living. I heard an American earlier in the week saying they just bought a frozen chicken for $20. 2 years ago, it cost $11.
Wow.
That's the reality of what drove this. And I think that's a danger signal and a lesson for the Labour government, because Biden's job creating record was second to none, but it didn't cut through in living standards, and we need to.
And they also let about 10 million illegal migrants in. Talking about frozen chicken, I suppose now Trump's back in, there's going to be all this talk of chlorinated chicken, Suzanne, and flogging the NHS off to America. That was a load of nonsense.
Well, I don't want to mix my food metaphors, but that really was a red herring, wasn't it? you know, I mean, all this fuss about chlorinated chicken. If you don't want to eat chlorinated chicken, just don't buy it. It's that simple. You know, the food labelling laws are so strict now, you can easily avoid that kind of thing. But the vote for Trump was incredible. The biggest the first time a Republican has won the popular vote, i.e. got more votes than anyone else in 20 years. That is something. I think that really says we've had enough of this left-wing wokery. We've had enough of uncontrolled immigration. We've had enough of, you know, this kind of trans zealotry where women aren't allowed to be women. They have to be so-called cis women, i.e. almost like we're not the real ones. I mean, people are very, very angry about that, and Kamala Harris embodies all of that. That was almost what she stood for. So, yeah, I think it should be a lesson to the Labour Party, who should not forget that in total contrast to Trump, they got barely 20% of the vote, actually, to have this massive government. So that's also, of course, an argument for electoral reform, but we're not going to talk about that.
That's a fair point, Bill.
Well, I mean, look, you know, we all have to learn lessons, but I think the big driver for this was cost of living. I do think immigration played a major part. If you look at the facts, actually, border crossings are down compared to 4 years ago when Trump was president. But in terms of tone and argument, it wasn't seen that Kamala Harris was addressing that. And I think that's where it's got applicability in this country. You know, deportations are up by 23% since the general election, but the government's not clearly...
What, in this country?
In this country.
Bill, listen, I asked the immigration minister in the House this week about these so-called deportations. 9,400 they're claiming the credit for. I asked the minister how many of those 9,400 were actually people that's come across the channel on small boats. She wouldn't answer me, and I'll tell you why she wouldn't answer me, because these are historical cases. There's probably been in this country donkey's years, and we've always been deporting them.
Yeah, but we've started clearing it up. You know, those cases have not been dealt with in the past. We had, in the middle of the summer, the biggest deportation flight, 200 people going to Brazil, that we've ever had. We need more of that. And yes, we need to tackle the boats, but we never said that would happen within a matter of months.
We always get back to the boats, Suzanne, don't we?
Always comes down to the boats, because that is the big issue, isn't it? You know, the pictures that we see on the television are quite horrific, really, because you see these young men, whereas we know that refugee columns traditionally have been women and children.
Yeah, and I had a little bit of a, not an argument, a debate, should we say, with one of the independents who sit behind us in the House yesterday, who want safe and legal routes, and they said this will stop the small boats crossings. It will not stop a single crossing if we have safe and legal routes, because the people coming over are not genuine asylum seekers.
Yeah, that's right. There's only one way to stop the boats, and that's turn them back. And until we start doing that...
But I tell you this, we need to tackle the boats, but they are an incredibly small percentage of the net migration figures within this country. We need progress across the board. We will get that, but one of the things that I thought was interesting in terms of the budget was the projections for the next 3 years of a net migration of 350,000. Now, that's progress, but it's not enough.
Yeah, but that's due to the measures that the previous Tory government come in, Bill. So Labour can't really claim credit for that.
Which are being followed through by this government, and actually in terms of deporting people and speeding up the processing and tackling...
Let me just throw this one out to Suzanne. This is one I was talking to my colleagues about a few days back, actually. When these illegal migrants get to this country, it is voluntary whether or not they give a DNA sample so they can go on the database. Do you think it should be compulsory? I'm thinking crime here.
I mean, I think if, you know, any other criminal might be asked to do that. And I think as long as that's dealt with, it's a very difficult one, because I personally get really quite agitated about this Big Brother society that we live in. But these are people who I mean, it depends really. Are the countries they're coming from, are you going to be able to check their DNA samples, or are you talking about it for a registered crime?
maybe some of them are on a register in a different country for committing crimes, Bill. Would you agree with DNA samples?
I would. I'm hard line on this. You know, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to fear. DNA samples allied with identity cards could be a significant element of the way we handle and manage this problem.
No, I agree with him, because I sort of suggest this again as well. Anybody who's arriving on small boats, or anybody who's not been in this country for more than 5 years and settled, I think they should have ID cards.
I mean, I think there is an issue if you've actually thrown your ID overboard.
Yeah.
So I'm absolutely not hardline on this at all. I think it's a thin end of a wedge, that more invasion of privacy, so on and so forth. And also, people will fake ID and all the rest of it. It's not really the answer. I don't think it's the answer myself. But I do take the point that you're talking here about people who've deliberately obscured their identity, their age in very many cases, by destroying documents. And I think then maybe, there does need to be a hardline approach.
Hardline approach, Bill. You agree?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I said that. And, you know, the record of the last Labour government was very hardline on reducing asylum numbers, and we did it. And this government
We've
can do it
gone
again.
from Trump winning the election to small boats to ID and DNA tests. So that's every pub is a parliament. That's what I love about this. We all get to discuss all these things, and we just go off on a tangent, don't we? It's really brilliant. That's brilliant. That's Bill Rammell and Suzanne Evans. Coming up next, we've got US political journalist Laurie Bird.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Maria, potholes, the bane of everybody that uses the road, whether you're a car driver or a cyclist. As a cyclist, are even worse. How have we got into this situation where our roads are in such a bad state?
Well, part of it is to do with actually our climate. In somewhere like, say, Sweden, like the snow will fall on the ground, it will stay there for months. Whereas here we've got what's called a freeze-thaw climate, where the water comes down, then we might have a cold snap and it freezes, and the water within the pothole will then expand and make the pothole bigger. Then we might have a mild spell, and then that process repeats. So, you know, we do actually need extra funding to acknowledge the fact that, you know, we just live in a climate where we're sort of particularly vulnerable to potholes.
Why? I mean, you know, the fact that this happens, these weather conditions happen, is no great surprise to anybody. Why has the problem been ignored for so long?
I think what's happened is we've had like short-term funding. So it's like, oh, there's a pothole, let's patch it up. Oh, there's another one, let's patch it up. But the patches aren't actually really that strong, so then they break down again. So, you know, really what we need is to have roads completely resurfaced, and then they'll just be pothole-free for a very long time. And that really is how funding should be. That's the direction funding should go in, as opposed to just sort of like dribs and drabs here and there.
Do you think this government are going to be good for the motorist, or is there indeed a war on the motorist still?
The different parties come in and they've all got different policies that they wheel out, then they cancel the policies, and then there's so much lack of transparency. Like, for example, with the pothole issue, sometimes the government, whichever government is in office, will do some big showboating about how they're going to give X amount of potholes, and you still think that sounds really good.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time for Back in the Day with US political journalist, Laurie Laird. Laird, is that Scottish?
It is.
And what does it mean?
Well, clearly I was a lord at one point, but probably wouldn't have left had we been lords, right?
Okay. So it's great to have you on the show, Laurie. I want to talk a little bit about US politics versus UK politics, because it's totally different so quickly for our viewers, because not a lot of people understand how US politics works and the legislature and how he passed laws. Slightly different this time because Trump's got a huge majority. So how does that benefit the US?
I think one of the things that we need to focus on is that there's these three bits of the US government, right? We've got the executive, that's where the president sits. Yeah. We've got Congress, which starts laws, passes laws, and then we have the judiciary. Take the judiciary out for a little bit. Okay. But here, you've got the majority party coming up with laws and putting it to a parliament where they have a majority. So it's really rare that the party in power doesn't get their legislation through. In the US, that's not been the case. We've had a divided legislature. You've got a president saying, I want to get this done, and Congress saying, we oppose you. Yeah. It's hard to get anything done. And wherever you are with Joe Biden, he got a lot of legislation through an inhospitable Congress. I don't know if it was particularly good legislation, but it's impressive that he did that. And I think that shows what 30 years on Capitol Hill, that kind of experience that you get. Different for Donald Trump this time, though, because he's got control of the Senate. The Republicans do. That's the upper house. Yeah. And they confirm all sorts of appointments. So Donald Trump will not have any trouble getting his people through, getting them into key positions. And it looks like he'll get the House of Representatives as well. We haven't had this kind of unified government in a long time. It gives him a lot of reign to do what he wants to do.
So he's got a lot of power, hasn't he? So it's going to hold him to account. How does that work in the US electoral system?
Voters in 4 years. I mean, there isn't a lot to hold him to account. And, remember, he's taken over the Republican Party. Now that he's a lame duck, will the Republican Party sort of kiss the ring for the next 4 years? Open question. They did it when Trump was out of power.
Just confirm what that means, kiss the ring, because that can mean something slightly different in this country, or is it the same thing?
What is it off? Is it off color?
I don't know.
Kiss the ring, bend on the knee to Donald Trump. Basically, do his bidding, even if they may not. So even if his party doesn't agree with him, Trump's hold on the Republican Party was so strong, even when he was out of power. Yeah. I mean, as a private citizen, he was so influential on policy because Republicans wanted to ride on his coattails. But he can't run next time. Will they continue to be that disciplined? It's a big question.
Yeah. Is that a problem? Because you can only run twice in America, can't you? You can be president twice. Is that a problem or a good thing, do you think?
Depends on, it means that you're unfettered with having to get elected again. And you don't have this here, right? You can run as many times as you want. The question is does that president want to keep his or her party in power? I'm not sure that Donald Trump does. I mean, Donald Trump he's a representative of the Republican Party, but he's kind of a solo operator.
Yeah.
He may not care what happens to the party after he's out of politics.
So, US politics,
park
that to one side. UK politics, what excites you about politics in the United Kingdom?
All right, this is really geeky and perhaps why I'm single. Economics, interest rates, and I look at the budget and I look at Rachel Reeves and think, gosh, I'd love to give her some media training. Gosh, I'd love to help with the presentation of her message. That last budget wasn't terrible. She sort of did.
I think a lot of people disagree with that, Laurie.
But why? Right? She said, I'm not sure if I agree with it. I'm not sure if economically it's that sound. But she said, we won't be raising all that many direct taxes. We're not touching national insurance. We're not touching income tax. She didn't do that. What she did may not be beneficial with the employee national insurance contributions. And she threw a lot of money at the NHS. And we all told pollsters we want the NHS to be better. So she did what people say they wanted.
Yeah.
And I don't know anyone who has said this is a good budget.
Well, listen, you talk about Rachel Reeves, and she's, in my opinion, she's not here to defend herself, by the way. She comes across a little bit cardboard. But then again, lots of politicians do in this country at the moment. Slightly different in the US when I watch some of these clips on YouTube. There's lots of personality there. I think Nigel's good in our country, even though I'm a little bit biased and is our party leader. But, sometimes people will vote on personalities rather than policies. Do you agree with that?
Well, and I think that's what Kamala Harris, going back to the US, tried to do. She tried to establish herself as a personality and surround herself with other personalities like Oprah Winfrey, like the Obamas, people that many voters admire.
Sort of backfired, didn't it?
I think it did. And watching Obama talk to an audience of black men saying, why are you going to vote for Trump? It seemed patronizing.
That's very patronizing, isn't it? That is. I mean, I've seen film stars like Robert De Niro coming out, who thinks he's a great film star, great actor. But some of his tone and his language towards Donald Trump, I'm thinking, you know what, if I was an American now, I'd be thinking, stuff you, I'm voting for Trump.
I think it's patronizing. The role of celebrity endorsements, and I think this is something that'll be debated when the Democrats are sort of, looking at the wreckage of this campaign. Yeah. You don't see it here, though, do you?
Well, I think it comes across, Laura, as a little bit desperate. It's like we've played every other card. Nobody's listening to us. Let's will some big, famous, millionaire Hollywood actors out, and maybe that'll get people to vote for us. But it's not worked.
But for reform, if you had one celebrity endorsement, who would it be? If you could choose one celeb?
I don't know. We did our conference about 2 months ago in Birmingham. We had Ant Middleton, who's ex-SAS, quite a big celebrity, in the armed forces world. He does lots of one-man shows, I think, around the country, and people really buy into his story. So he was sort of our celebrity. But then we had Anne Widdecombe as well, who's probably one of the most...
Some circles.
Yeah, she is, and I think it's important. There is a case for these people to come and express their opinion, because back in the day, people didn't really know which way people swung politically, but now more and more people are coming out. We see it on Twitter, we see it on Facebook. But I'm not going back to the US election, I'm not convinced that wheeling out these personalities has actually helped. I think it's hindered.
One of the things that I found so disappointing this is a couple of months ago, in the lead up to the election, George Clooney, everyone knows who he is, did a massive fundraiser for Joe Biden. Joe Biden was still in the race at that point. Raised something like $30 million.
Wow.
And then came the disastrous debate in late June. And Clooney writes an op-ed in the New York Times saying, step aside, Joe. We all knew something wasn't right here. But 2 weeks ago, you raised money for him, and you didn't think the public needed to know at that point that the man wasn't fit for office?
Yeah. So, Laura, you look at these celebrities, your Robert De Niro's, your George Clooney's, they're campaigning for the Democratic Party, and they're saying all this stuff on TV and raising millions and millions of pounds. And, the Joe public's looking at it and thinking, no, it's okay for you. You live in your big mansion up in Beverly Hills, wherever it is. What's all that about? Why are you getting involved?
Wheeling Jennifer Lopez out to talk to the Hispanic community, particularly after that Puerto Ricans are garbage comment, which Trump didn't make. A comedian made it. A guy who shouldn't call himself a comedian. That guy was not funny. But wheeling Jennifer Lopez out to talk to a cohort that both parties consider to be struggling, just completely not relatable, is it? Well,
it didn't work at all, did it? I think it sort of backfired on them. Look, that's a fascinating discussion. I love it to meet you. I could have just chatted about that all night, but time's time. Coming up next, we've got Left versus Right with Suzanne Evans and Bill Rammell.
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Kind of more of the same tomorrow. The weather patterns are slowly starting to shift, but again, grey and dry for most tomorrow. But there'll be, again, some sunshine in northern Scotland. High pressure is still sitting to the east, keeping the weather fronts at bay for now. A bit of drizzle here and there today, particularly across southwest England, staying a bit damp and drizzly and dank across the south coast of England tonight, and turning that way too across parts of the east, northeast England into eastern Scotland, seeing some drizzle. Northwest Scotland keeping the clear skies, could see some fog here, and certainly temperatures in sheltered glens likely to get down close to freezing. For most though, we'll start the weekend at 6 or 7, 9 or 10 in the west. On to Saturday. And it is kind of dry and cloudy, but there will be a bit more in the way of drizzle, perhaps along the south coast of England. Again, mostly over the hills, so the moors in the southwest, seeing a bit of drizzle. But also northeastern parts of England, a bit dank and drizzly here, and some of that working into eastern Scotland. Cloudy for Northern Ireland, but western Scotland doing okay for sunshine. There will be some fog around first thing, and actually that fog could be quite stubborn. It could persist for much of the day, but generally it's the far northwest which will see the bluest of the skies. Elsewhere, again, a pretty grey day. Some drizzle at times on eastern coasts and across the south, but many areas just dry and dull, and a little colder than it has been for much of this week. Temperatures struggling, particularly across central and eastern England, only 8-9 degrees, and with that drizzle feeling even cooler. Further west, we should climb into the teens. Now, on Sunday, we will start to see more of a change, a bit more in the way of wet weather coming into the west. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle, nothing too heavy, but behind this band of rain, Western Scotland and Northern Ireland should get brighter for the afternoon. Most of England and Wales staying pretty grey, but some brightness likely in the east on Sunday. So a brighter day here, and also for most of us, a little warmer on Sunday too.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's time for Right versus Left. And joining me again, we've got Europe's most senior political consultant, Suzanne Evans, and Bill. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for coming back.
Former senior Labour minister.
You're still senior, aren't you? So listen, farmers' fury. Are the Labour government biting the hand that feeds us with this ridiculous, impartial here, ridiculous inheritance tax on farmers? Suzanne?
They're biting the hand that feeds us all. I get excited and agitated about a lot of things in politics. I don't think I've been more angry about this, anything else, for a very long time, really. I live in rural Shropshire. I'm surrounded by farms. They're going to take a massive hit here. The one security for food that we had in this country was that you knew that you could pass your farm on to your children without having to pay tax on it. And that's now been utterly devastated. Most farms are worth over £1 million. I mean, this nonsense that Rachel Reeves is talking, that it's only 20%, that is completely disputed by HMRC's own figures, by DEFRA's own figures, by the National Farmers Union's figures. It's utter nonsense. I've got the DEFRA figures here in front of me. The average net worth across all farms was 2.2 million in 2023. And obviously house prices have gone up massively since that, because as soon as more people keep coming into the country, of course, they're going to keep going up. She says, oh, you can pay off the tax debt within 10 years tax-free. But the average income of a farm is only around £90,000, and that's the income, not the profit. Yeah. So farmers have been completely
I think Bill's going to disagree. Bill, look, I spoke to a farmer earlier this week. He's only got a small farm, a few hundred acres. He tells me a combine harvester is best part of £250,000. Tractor, another 100 and something grand plus VAT. There's your £1 million straight away.
Do you know, I've never seen such manufactured, ill-informed grief about a tax change as this. Farmers, you know, Paul Johnson from the IFS said this is massively overblown. Farmers
what does the IFS know about farming?
Farmers have got nothing to fear. Under these changes, you can still pass on £3 million tax-free. You then only pay 20% inheritance tax on anything you pass on above £3 million, and you've got 10 years to pay it. I mean, this is an exceptional deal that no one else in society has got. And frankly, I think the farmers need to keep quiet so that other people don't get angry and saying, why are they getting that preferential treatment?
This is about the very food security that, you know, we all need to eat. We all need food on our plates. And if farmers don't provide that and can't provide that because they're going out of business left, right and centre, this isn't any ordinary business. And I'm sorry, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, let's be clear, in my opinion, they're a left-wing think tank. They want capital gains tax put on debt. They were trying to lobby the Chancellor before the budget budget, saying not just inheritance tax, put capital gains tax on second properties and businesses as well. So they would go even further. They would completely decimate most of the businesses in this country. We shouldn't listen to a word they say.
Spectrum, the IFS is respected as being neutral and authoritative. And the reality is farmers are going to be able to pass on wealth way beyond other members of society.
So why are farmers up in arms about it, Bill?
Go back through history. Farmers are a very well organised and coordinated lobbying group who lobby very loudly and very heavily against any change that protects their vested interests.
Bill,
and that's what's going on.
Have you ever worked on a farm, Bill? Do you know what the kind of day a farmer has? Up at 5 a.m, if he's lucky, if he's not up earlier, particularly if you're a dairy farm.
And there's lots of people in society who work those hours and they don't get the benefits that farmers are getting.
Every day, you can't take a holiday, you can never take a day off. It's a flipping hard lifestyle. I know it is. I come from a farming family, and the way farmers are treated is despicable. No farmers, no food. That's the reality here. We have to look after the people that feed us, and I'm absolutely appalled. You know, this was pretty much out of the blue. Not entirely out of the blue. It was mooted before the budget, but it was pretty much out of the blue, and we're all going to suffer as a result of this.
Do you know, farmers
really
do incredibly good work, and they work very hard, but they can't hold the country to ransom.
Not holding the country to ransom. They feed the country.
And they should not be able to expect that they get preferential treatment that no one else in society gets.
What they're actually doing is just passing their farm on to the next generation so that next generation can feed us.
But anyone else can say that about the inheritance tax laws. We've got, you know, a massive transference of wealth from generation to generation that will grow inequality. We've got public services that need funding. I'd far rather we're funding that through inheritance tax than taxes on ordinary working people. That's the choice. And people who oppose this inheritance tax change have to answer, what other taxes would you put up, or what cuts in public spending would you deliver?
We don't, Bill. That's wrong, because, you know, Rachel Reeves has claimed she's found this £22 billion black hole.
True.
OK, let's assume that is true. I dispute that, frankly. But then she manages to give Ed Miliband £22 billion for a completely spurious...
Over 5 years, so the figures aren't equivalent.
You know, carbon storage plan that might not even work. If there was a genuine black hole, if we were genuinely struggling cash, that would not have happened.
Do you know, people voted for
We'd
change.
have got farmers to plant
they've got change all right, Bill. They've got change all right.
People voted for change at the general election. They voted for investment in public services. That has to be paid for. I'd far rather that the wealthy contribute to that change rather than ordinary working people.
But the wealthy are leaving the country, Bill.
Yeah.
Let's see things settle down. We've always had these claims in the past. When you go back a year later and you see virtually nobody's gone, they've got a stake in this country.
It's that same old thing. It's this towny attitude, I'm afraid, that all farmers are rich. It's absolute
No, I'm not saying
rubbish.
that. And the figures actually show that only 209,000 farms will be affected. I saw a tax consultant yesterday that said it'll be even less than that,
Well,
only
that's
100
not true.
farms.
That's not true, Bill. In
Well, he knows what he's talking
2021-22, 500 farms were involved, and that's gone up much more now. The NFU reckons that 75% of all farms are going to be affected by this. And if you look at DEFRA zone figures that I mentioned earlier, that makes perfect sense. And that's 75% potentially of our British food.
Look, Bill, we've had over the past 20 odd years, we've had a lot of madness in this country, political madness, where we've got rid of all our energy suppliers. You know, we don't fry, we don't mine coal, we're cutting back on gas, and now we're sorting on our food as well. It's absolute nonsense. When are we going to learn lessons in this country?
We need to learn lessons about fairness, and these changes are about fairness. And Suzanne says that repeating ridiculous claims by the NFU that 75% farms are going to be affected. You just quoted that the average farm price is 2.2 million. Well, they can pass on £3 million tax-free under these changes.
No, it's a £1 million threshold.
No, it's 1 + 1 and an additional £1 million, and you then get a reduced rate of inheritance tax of 20% that no one else in society gets, and you get 10 years to pay it. This is a damn good deal.
As I said, Bill, the fact is most farm incomes are not going to be enough to pay that. They're going to have to sell land, and then what's going to happen? Oh, whoopee, Ed Miliband's going to be even
This is
happier.
the point, Bill. You sell a
This is
field
massive point.
to pay some of this tax bill off. What happens to that field?
Yeah,
it doesn't get farmed on. They probably put some ponies on, or use it for
Or a solar
recreation.
farm or
or a solar farm or something like that.
The minority of farmers who are affected will pass on their farms before they die to their children, and they'll avoid the tax. It's what farmers have done since time immemorial. This is manufactured, over-the-top lobbying.
And you don't think they're looking to close that as well?
Well,
Because that's the other thing.
there's nothing in the budget.
Listen, it's time for the quiz of the week. Right, it's a yes or no quiz, Suzanne. You know how it works. I think, who did you play last time? Was it Stephen?
It was Bill. It was Bill, and I lost a point because I didn't.
Oh, right, okay.
Hated,
So
it's
it's time for revenge. And I think Bill's going to slip up this week. Well, try and make him anyway. So, number one, Bill, will Trump be a force for good?
No.
Suzanne?
Yeah.
Suzanne, should Sir Keir Starmer welcome Trump to Parliament?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Ooh. 3, Bill, should Labour scrap the inheritance tax on farms?
No.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Verbal tick. Can't give you that.
I didn't quite understand the question. Then.
Yes. It's got to be a yes or a no.
You know I'm a definite yes.
I can't give you that. They never learn, do they, Bill? Suzanne, will Labour smash the gangs?
No.
Yes.
You said that with a straight face, didn't you?
I believe it.
And Bill, I don't even know what I've written here. What does that say there?
Should.
Should Bill Rammell make a political comeback?
Yes.
There's a tick there. There's definitely a tick there, weren't there? Yes.
It was.
Yeah, so I can't give you that. Suzanne, chance to equalise. Should Bill Rammell?
Of course, yes.
Oh
no, I did it wrong again.
What is wrong with people? Yeah, I'm just going to have a word with the producer.
Sir.
Can we get some better guests next time on the show? It's basic, isn't it? Yes or no? Bill, do you want to come back on one? Should you make a political comeback?
Given there's a process going on, Labour people going to the House of Lords, I'm going to say nothing.
Oh,
it's Lord Bill. Can we put Lord Bill on the show? So we'll introduce him as Lord Bill Rammell. Suzanne, do you want to come back on one? We should Sir Keir Starmer welcome Donald Trump to Parliament, get him on the old steps in Westminster Hall, let him address the House of Commons and the House of Lords?
Yeah,
That'd be a
absolutely,
fun day.
definitely. I think so. I mean, I remember when Trump last came to the UK, it was actually terribly exciting. I was driving down the M40 and I saw his cavalcade of helicopters fly across the motorway in front of me as he was going to dinner in Oxford. It was very
And we should stop this silliness as well, Sir Bill, or Lord Bill, of this. I think it was Khan who put the big balloon up over the Thames of. I mean, what was all that about? It's childish.
Look, once someone is elected, you work with them. I mean, God, I'm a minister who went and negotiated with the North Koreans in North Korea.
Yeah.
So, if you're prepared to do that, you talk to people, you engage with them. And the United States is our biggest, most influential partner, and of course we will work with them.
It is. Well, listen, that's a great quiz. It was 4-all. Thanks, Suzanne Evans. Thanks, Lord Bill Rammell. Get ready for that. I'm going to be seeing him knocking about. Well, coming up next, we've got Last Orders with Ken Hines. Thanks, guys.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. But let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And for the next nearly 400 years, had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home? Talking about? Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Last time for the last orders at the bar. Delighted to be joined by Ken Hines. You're a knife crime campaigner. Welcome to the show, Ken. So you're a sort of a poacher turned gamekeeper sort of thing, involved in a bit of crime when you was younger, but turned your life around, did a bit of time in prison, and now you're doing great work at helping young people in your community, get rid of those knives and hopefully get a better life for themselves.
Yes, so it's not as simple as that, but it's also giving them options. It's also saying to them at the end of the day that, if you put positive energy into your space, then, you won't have to look over your shoulder. But the simple fact is that if you carry a knife or you use a knife, then, it's going to affect your life and people around you somewhere down the line.
Why are people carrying, especially young men, Ken, why are they carrying knives?
For a variety of reasons, but the main thing is about protection, about safeguarding themselves. They don't believe that the police is going to be there. They don't believe that, particularly from my community, they don't believe that the police are there to safeguard them. What they believe...
Safeguard them from who exactly?
From even other people. Like if they get their mobile phone stolen, or if they get beaten up, or if they get robbed, they feel like the police really do not care. So long as we keep it in the black community, it seems that the police won't investigate it as if it was out in the wider community. So it's misguided, whichever way it is.
So there is a gang culture as well in London as well, where gangs carry knives and weapons, and they seem to be, in London it's awful at the moment. It seems to be a murder at least every week, on the streets of London. And I suppose if you're getting out there and talking to these young people, trying to make a difference, are you actually getting through to some of these young people?
Absolutely. Whether it's been, I run a group called Community Against Violence.
Okay.
I'm also the co-chair of the Haringey Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. So I go in the streets and I go into the hood and let people know about their rights and responsibility around stop and search.
Yeah.
And eventually, and more currently, I'm part of what we call the Street Fathers. Okay. The Street Fathers are a group of men. Some of us have got checkered past, but we want to make a difference. And we go, you may call it patrolling, but I call it engaging.
Yeah.
So we would go in these hotspot areas and we would engage in the people in that space. And if we see a confrontation, we step in and de-escalate. We're about keeping the peace. It takes two to go to war, one to make the peace.
So where do you stand, Ken, on stop and search? That's quite controversial sometimes.
Again, I've been stopped and searched over 125 times. It's well documented. But where do I stand? I'm also an advisor, a community police facilitator at the Hendon Police Academy as an advisor to the police. Back in the days, I'd be throwing bricks and bottles at them. Now I'm throwing confetti. So I often, maybe I might need counselling on this to see where's that gone. But the important thing about stop and search, it is a place for stop and search, but let's have a real conversation as to the effectiveness, because it's not for getting knives and guns off our street. It's for more about stopping people around the Misuse of Drugs Act.
It's all well and good, Ken, having stop and search, but what about the consequences if a young man or a young girl is caught with a knife? Is it tough enough? Or?
It's definitely not tough enough. If you're under 18, it's definitely not tough enough. You get slap on the wrist. You get put into a tag, which means that your movement is monitored, or you have to be indoors after 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it really does not equate to what's going on. Personally, a prison doesn't suit everyone, because again, I went there and I learned how to be get into other avenue of crime from other prisoners.
Like a college for crime, is it?
Absolutely. I find that if you can get in early enough, and a shock treatment may work for a person who get caught the first time.
Yeah.
And I'd be like more like a Borstal, or more like being in a regiment, like being in the army, like where you get up at 6 o'clock and you've got a march and you've got to
like
run.
a boot camp.
A boot camp.
Yeah.
You definitely need that, and you definitely need to bring in some sort of discipline, because usually a lot of these young people haven't got that discipline in their life.
Well, role models is important, isn't it?
Yeah, role models can play an important part, because I do mentor a lot of these young men that are a part of the group that I've been involved in as a band of brothers, where we took young men who's been involved in crime or on the crush or about to get into crime, and we actually help turn their life around. We can't save everybody, because there's two types of saving. You can actually rescue someone and they'll never change, or you can support someone and they will take on board and change. And it's also, there's two ways of learning. As I said, learning from yourself or learning from others' experience.
So you're out on your patrol, so let's go to patrol, one Saturday night, and you see a gang of youths there hanging around looking like they're up to no good. How would you approach them, Ken?
I would go straight into them. I said, guys, listen, mate.
Yeah.
Do you know what your rights are around stop and search? And they said, what do you mean? I said, look, because I said, I've been stopped and searched over 100 times.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, I'm sure that from you guys being on the front line here, you're candidate to be stop and search. But it's important that you know how to engage if the police should stop you, and you should know what your rights are.
Engage positively?
Of course, positively. Because all too often, as I give them the top 5 tips, is to stay calm.
Yeah.
Keep your emotion under control, because the police have got the ultimate power of arrest.
They have. Anyway, talking about power, we're going to test your pulling power now, Ken. There's a pint pot. I know you're not a beer drinker. One of my favourite tipples is the old neck oil. You've got 30 seconds to pull the perfect pint and plonk it on the bar. And as you're doing that, we'll carry on our chat on the wonderful work, I think, that you're doing. I said earlier that, go for it, mate. It's not good, is it? Keep going as quick as you can. Get it on the bar. And you've just got another inch to go. Get that on there, and if you put that on the bar, Ken, we can see guys at home, that's pathetic. I'm sure the good work you do within the community is far better than that. And you must have had some good successes where you've turned people's lives around. How does that feel for you?
It's amazing to see one person who was involved in 14, 15 years involved in county lines, how we managed then to support him into turning his life around. Now he's out there training to be a pilot. Now,
wow.
This is an incredible, the things that can happen. You understand? And that's just one aspect. But we've got other aspects where people have given up their lifestyle, their risky lifestyle, and gone into college and have developed themselves. Others have gone in to start their own business. These are success stories.
These are like second chances for people, aren't they? I'm a big believer in second chances.
Yes, because I always tell them, your past doesn't dictate what your future are. And you've got to realise your past can actually help get you to be help you to grow to be the man you want to be.
Yeah.
It's so important that people realise that if you've got high self-esteem, that it's very unlikely that people will bring you down that dodgy road.
Yeah, I mean, you said earlier, Ken, that you've got a checkered past. I know you've been inside, been a bad lad in the past, but you've turned your life around and you're making a positive difference for young people in your community right now. It's a wonderful thing you're doing.
It is, because look, my life story doesn't have to be theirs, but I can tell it to them and they can identify with certain aspect of their own. So I can also see where they are in their life and what needs to be changed in their life to make them into that stronger and more positive, community-spirited person,
Wow.
which is so important for us, because I do not like the violence. Even though I came from a violent background, personally, it's my purpose in life to turn around those who wants to be supported in bringing positive change.
You should be very proud of yourself, young man. Ken Hines, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You're doing a fantastic job, and you are making a difference in people's lives. That's Ken Hines. That's Last Orders. Thanks for joining me on Lee Anderson's Real World. Been another great show with some great guests. Oh, almost forget, Ken Hines' point, a pathetic 1 out of 10. Do not go away. Coming up next, we've got the brilliant Mark Dolan with Friday Night Live.
Nice one. Thank you, Lee, for an excellent show. Well, is Jeremy Clarkson right that Sir Keir Starmer is the farmer harmer? Also, as they try to build bridges with Donald Trump's new team after being rude about him in the past, are Angela Rayner and David Lammy a national embarrassment? Plus, can Nigel Farage save the special relationship?
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Kind of more of the same tomorrow. The weather patterns are slowly starting to shift, but again, grey and dry for most tomorrow. But there'll be, again, some sunshine in northern Scotland. High pressure is still sitting to the east, keeping the weather fronts at bay for now. A bit of drizzle here and there today, particularly across southwest England, staying a bit damp and drizzly and dank across the south coast of England tonight, and turning that way too across parts of the east, northeast England into eastern Scotland, seeing some drizzle. Northwest Scotland keeping the clear skies, could see some fog here, and certainly temperatures in sheltered glens likely to get down close to freezing. For most though, we'll start the weekend at 6 or 7, 9 or 10 in the west. On to Saturday, and it is kind of dry and cloudy, but there will be a bit more in the way of drizzle, perhaps along the south coast of England. Again, mostly over the hills, so the moors in the southwest seeing a bit of drizzle, but also northeastern parts of England, a bit dank and drizzly here, and some of that working into eastern Scotland. Cloudy for Northern Ireland, but western Scotland